What do you expect from a really good phone? High performance? Check. Great battery life? Check. Awesome display? Check. Snappy performance? Check. Amazing cameras? We'll see. Durable design? We'll see. Great software? We'll see. And that's the thing about the Oneplus 10T. It checks on almost everything that a person would want from an everyday high-performance smartphone, but then it cuts back on things that make a smartphone a flagship. And that's probably why it's priced somewhere in the middle. It's almost like the Oneplus 10 Pro Fan Edition. Let's talk about this. Look, I have to admit, the phone looks good to me. Personally speaking, especially with that color, I really like it. Sure, you could say that it looks a lot like the Oneplus 10 Pro, but then what's wrong with that? You could also say that the camera housing is ugly, but that's arguable. I think it's a very bold design. Not elegant, but quite bold. And it's almost like uniquely OnePlus. You can look at it and say, hey, that's a OnePlus phone. And honestly, this color is beautiful. I've never seen anything like it. But do keep in mind that this is a glossy finish. It is a bit of a fingerprint magnet. There's a black color too, which comes in different soft texture and not glossy. It's a big phone though, 6.7 inches of that screen. It will feel a bit extra width-wise, especially if you've got small hands like I do. And it weighs more than 200 grams. It's slightly on the heavier side, I'd say. Now let's talk about some design cutbacks. And the front and the back, both are glass and both protected using Gorilla Glass 5. Not the toughest protection in 2022, but it's still quite durable. It's also not IP68 water and dust resistant, so it can withstand splashes of water, but you cannot dip it in water and expect it to work. It also does not support wireless charging, but the biggest cutback is the removal of alert slider. And sure, they talked all about how it gives them more space inside the phone to be able to increase battery capacity, faster charging, and overall improve performance. But here's the reality of it. If you've never been a OnePlus user, just any other Android phone, you're pretty much conditioned to using the software to change your sound profile. But if you've been a OnePlus user, chances are you're preconditioned to be using that physical button to go from mute to ringing to vibrate, and you're gonna miss that. So I think it was pretty iconic of OnePlus to have the alert slider, and now it's gone. And it would be quite unfortunate if OnePlus took this design across all its future phones. Now, there are 3 variants that you can get. There is 8 gigs of RAM, 12 gigs of RAM, and 16 gigs of RAM. So lots of RAM. In fact, within the software, OnePlus does allow you to expand the RAM as well. So even if you get 8 gigs of RAM, it's quite good. Now, if you want more internal storage, just go for the 12 gigs variant. Moving on to the display, and there's nothing to not like. It's gorgeous, 6.7 inches, 10-bit color display, Fluid AMOLED, and you get adaptive 120Hz refresh rate, and it's HDR10 Plus ready. In fact, if you're playing HDR content, there is a setting that allows you to punch up the brightness and make HDR videos play in full glory. There are 2 cutbacks now. It's an adaptive refresh rate, but it only varies between 60Hz and 120Hz, unlike the 10 Pro, which is 1Hz to 120Hz. Also, it's a flat display, which is cheaper than flexible OLEDs, which roll over the edge like in the Oneplus 10 Pro. And while it might be a price cut, it's actually better to have flat displays. I mean, they're just easier to hold, a lot better to hold, and there's less fatigue when you use a phone over a long time. The colors look great. I mean, it's AMOLED, the best that there is, and it's got a billion colors to display, so quite accurate as well. Outdoor visibility is not a problem too. I was able to easily use it under bright sunlight and didn't even have to squint my eye at all. Okay, in terms of performance, there's really nothing to complain about. I mean, the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 chip is the fastest chip out there. The Oneplus 10T's got it. It's super fluid, buttery smooth. I thoroughly enjoyed gaming on this. Very responsive, no lag, absolutely a beast at it. It didn't even get hot. I mean, I was playing for about an hour straight and it was barely warm. And they do have a 2nd gen 3D cooling technology now that helps them achieve that. Also, with the alert slider gone, they did talk about how they've been able to improve latency during gaming. So while there's no calculation that I've done, or I don't have the right equipment to do that, but if I had to lay my bets on which phone would have better multiplayer online gaming, that would be Oneplus 10T. The internal storage is UFS 3.1, so that's quite fast. Whether it's app launching, phone boot up, and even software updates, that would just blaze through on this phone. Now let's also talk about battery and charging, and here are my battery stats for you. I had Instagram, WhatsApp and Slack on through the day, so I was in and out of those. I had 2 email accounts on sync. I used Netflix for about an hour, watched YouTube for about an hour. I played music, I was using maps for navigation, Call of Duty for about 45 minutes. I also used the camera for taking all the samples, right? There was like 4K video recording, photo samples, and yet, despite all of this, I was left with 23% at about 10:30 in the night. That, according to me, is really good. And it charges really fast, so even if you did run out of battery, I went from 1 to 100% in about 22 minutes. That's crazy. Of course, I was using the 150 watt charger that, by the way, comes in the box, so it's really good. Okay, now let's talk about the cameras. And while the specs are right here in front of you, let's look at some real photo samples. Starting with shots that I took using the primary lens outdoors. And if you see, the sky is quite nicely captured, which otherwise could have been overblown. The t-shirt colors of orange and blue are also nicely captured, and the greens look natural to me. And those natural sun flares on the top left and the bottom right corner also look good. Same in this shot too. Notice the sky, very nicely done. So guys, there's going to be a link in the description wherein you can download all of these photos and evaluate the quality for yourself. I hope that's helpful. The shots came out very well even indoors. I mean, if you've got ample lighting, the camera does a good job of capturing details and keeping the picture very crisp. Do note, none of these photos are treated or filtered. They're completely natural and straight from the phone's camera. Now, as the sun began to set, I started taking some low light shots. Now, with some light still left, the shots came out well balanced. However, when it became slightly darker, that's when some of the details started to disappear in the shadows. Now, these aren't great night shots because they sometimes, lack the white balance, or sometimes the colors look very flat, but these aren't horrible either. They're just about okay. I do feel that when it's low light, the images start to lose their sharpness, especially in this shot, when there's some moving objects and it's completely nighttime. But when it comes to the portrait mode, that works really well. You can decide the intensity of the blur you want before you shoot a photo, which is good. But frankly, the camera does a fantastic job of identifying the object in the foreground and nicely blurring out the backdrop. Let's talk about the ultra-wide lens now. So here's a photo captured using the primary lens, and then this is what I shot using the ultra-wide lens. And it tends to have a cooler and a greener white balance, so if you notice, the greens are very bright and saturated, and the sky is a lot blue than what you see in the primary lens photo. Also, you can look at the detail that's completely washed out when it comes to the ultra-wide lens, which of course is also an inferior camera because it's just 8 megapixel. And this observation is true for almost all pictures that I took first using the primary and then using the ultrawide, just the case you see here as well. Another example, so this was shot using the primary lens, look at the greens, and then when you go to this, the greens are just super saturated, and again, on the top right corner, the details are lost. And if you look at this one, on the top right corner, you'll also notice some blooming around the leaves in the ultrawide photo. And then check out this photo. If you look at the door on the left on the primary lens, you can see the shape and the pattern of the grille, like the whole design's visible. But if you look at the ultra wide lens, that pattern, that detail is missing. And even in low light, the ultra wide photos tends to lose sharpness and colors even more than the primary photos did. These greens look very flat and washed out. And in this one, the white balance just goes for a toss. Now let's talk about the selfie camera, and it does a pretty decent job of clicking nice balanced selfies. So whether I'm facing the sun or the sun is behind me, the camera did a pretty good job of not overexposing the sky, it maintains the color balance, and it tries to take a natural selfie. Again guys, all of this is available for you to download, so just do that and just check out all of these. And never mind how tired I look here. And lastly, let's talk about the video quality. So the camera can shoot in 4K at up to 60 FPS. So you do get super smooth 4K videos. And even while walking, I feel the video is fairly stable. But I do have to add the fact that my hands in general are very stable while walking and shooting. The exposure is also well maintained and the colors look good. The camera does struggle with auto-focusing quickly. So if you went close to a subject, it might take a while, or you may have to actually tap on the screen to shift the focus. So just like here, I had to tap, and then it does a bit of thing with adjusting the exposure, and then when you go out, you again have to tap to quickly get the object back into focus. But otherwise, as long as the lighting is good and you've got stable hands, I think it does a decent job, if not the best. It's 4K quality and it looks just about okay. Even indoors, as you can see, I think it's capturing quite well. So it's not as shaky, the stability is quite nice, and right now I'm going down the stairs. So again, I told you that my hands in general are quite stable, but yeah, it's pretty indicative of what kind of footage you can expect. Now this is inside a library, so again, pretty good, and this is like absolute pitch dark. There's obviously a lot of ambient lighting, but this is night time. I did have a few issues with focusing quickly, but if I tapped on the screen, it was very quick to focus. But yeah, if it's nighttime and you've got limited ambient lighting like the way it is here, this is the kind of footage you can expect. There's also a 2-megapixel macro cam. Now again, I don't know why anyone puts a macro cam, but look, either put a really good one in there or just don't. Now let's talk about the cutbacks in the camera department. And the first one is that the selfie camera cannot shoot in 4K. And the second one is that there is no Hasselblad color science in these cameras. And so if you see here in the camera housing, there's no branding of Hasselblad as you could see with the previous generation of OnePlus phones or even the OnePlus 10 Pro. And I'm not sure if you were able to tell the difference when you saw the sample photos, but again, they're all available for you to download. So go in the link in the description, download those photos and evaluate for yourself. In terms of camera modes, you get all the standard modes along with these that you see here. Dual view is great if you want to record from both the front and the rear cameras simultaneously. There's also a pro photo mode that would allow you to change, the ISO, the shutter, the white balance, and manage the focus manually. What's really interesting is the pro video mode. Firstly, it allows you to stabilize your footage with a bit of a crop. It's great if you're shooting a video while moving, as the footage is really stable. But then you're limited to 1080p video quality in that case. Also, the movie mode offers a log profile. It may look flat at first, but then it captures more dynamic range and allows you to grade your footage later with more finesse. And lastly, you can straight shoot in HDR mode that shoots in a richer color gamut and just looks so much more vibrant straight off the camera. So overall, for about $650 or 50,000 rupees, what you do get are the fastest performing chip in the smartphone industry right now, great battery, great display, and 4 years of OS support. That's pretty good. Do note, keep in mind that there are still phones in this price segment that don't offer the best high performing chip right now. And this does. So that's pretty much what you're paying for. And the things that could feel a compromise could be the fact that they remove the alert slider. There's no wireless charging. There's no IP68 water or dust resistance. And it could do with a better camera system. So those are probably compromises. So you got to get your priorities right, okay? Performance, battery, great display, OS upgrade and support for 4 years. If those things are important, this is the phone to get right now. I mean, for that kind of price. And that's pretty much it, guys, on the OnePlus 10T. Now, if you guys have any questions, feel free to ask me in the comment section. Of course, I'll get back to you with the answers. And if this review was helpful, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, hit that bell notification icon, and mark all. Really helps the channel grow. I'll see you guys in the next one.